Hello, my friends. William here on the 10th of November, 2025. This is the Grand Duke Dmitri 1917 Diary Series, and we've got a significant change of topic today, although we're still in the long diary entry of Wednesday, the 11th October. So the topic for the last 2 or 3 videos has been gambling and this huge debt that Dmitri incurred one night at the Club Imperial. So that sinful fall, as he calls it, we've been talking about that and what it's going to take to repay that gambling loss. He's contemplating a bank loan and telling us that he actually suffered 4 days of prostration as a result of crashing from that high at the gambling table. Anyway, as I said, completely different topic. So today we're turning to news from Russia and what he finds most interesting and significant and what his opinions are. So here we go. Now enough of that lousy topic, meaning the gambling. I will switch to another. Concerning Russia, apparently the situation hasn't changed this week. The only thing really is that the newspapers are talking openly about the beginning of the evacuation of Petrograd as a place that now falls within the zone of military action. It's terribly depressing to read about these things. That's what we've come to. We have to save our capital. It's already in the war zone. And how recently it was that we were mocking the French when, at the beginning of the war, they nearly gave up Paris. And now we ourselves are in the same situation, and the shame is horrendous. In my opinion, there is now no reason why the Germans shouldn't seize Petrograd or any other place. After all, we have no more power to resist. The extent of our retreat depends on the desire of the Germans themselves. If they want to advance, they'll do it. To take comfort in the thought that our miracle-working heroes will wake up to the patriotic impulse to lay down their lives for their perishing motherland is pretty naive. There's one thing I don't understand. Lately in the newspapers, one reads speeches made by the ministers of war and the Navy to the effect that the reorganization of the Army can only occur with the help of democratic reform and soldiers' organizations, that punishment and the death penalty won't improve things. How they can spout such nonsense, I repeat, it's incomprehensible to me. After all, it's already sufficiently clear what the democratization of the army leads to. Or maybe all these speech-giving ministers still haven't seen enough. I understand perfectly well that to cut the army off from participation in politics and return to the former discipline is, at this late date, completely impossible. But to say that it could be reconstructed with the help of democratic principles, that's just absurd, which has already been shown so tragically. Etter is correct when he sadly proclaims that we no longer actually have an army in Russia. What kind of army is it that cannot attack or defend, that has no discipline and is half full of deserters? What I am saying sounds horrendous, but nonetheless it is the unembellished truth. And then what is necessary to note from the latest newspapers is the growing anarchy and agrarian disorders in Russia. Even the provisional government now acknowledges this fact, which is apparent from the speeches of the various ministers. So we are literally hurling ourselves into the abyss, and unless there's a miracle, Russia is done. But there will undoubtedly be a miracle. And the more I think about it, the stronger my belief in it becomes. And it seems to me that this miracle, which alone can save Russia, is just around the corner. Despite all the destruction that's going on, I firmly believe, perhaps even more than before, that the Lord God will not allow Russia of the Orthodox faith to perish in this way. Exclamation point. So something is definitely just around the corner, but it's not Russia's salvation. It is the Bolshevik Revolution. All right. This one is extremely interesting, an extremely interesting topic, but even beyond the topic itself, Dmitri's way of looking at things. So he tells us that he's not interested in, putting putting a spin on things, but presenting the unembellished truth, even though clearly it's very depressing, and not at all what he wants. And he proceeds to do that. But then we have this turnaround at the end, so we'll talk about that. Okay, so the whole issue with Petrograd, he informed us several diary entries ago that the Germans were launching an invasion of the Estonian islands that had a commanding place in the Baltic, and were from which one could launch an invasion of Petrograd. And the Germans did indeed successfully take those islands, but the invasion of Petrograd never happened. And why that was the case, I'm not a military expert. I did not do extensive research on this. It may well be that there are some of you watching who do have expertise on the military at that time and what was going on at that time, but I don't. I just know that this momentarily expected invasion of Petrograd didn't happen, and I don't believe there was any evacuation either. It's, this going on then to say, we were mocking the French about their capital being taken, and now we're in the same position. Yeah, that's right. That's right. He correctly remembers that. And here, he follows that by talking about horrendous shame, the horrendous shame that our capital is now in the war zone. And that's so typical of Dmitri. Another person writing about this in a diary maybe wouldn't have used the word shame. But whether it's in relation to his gambling problem or anything else, that's the paradigm for Dmitri. Is it a source of shame, or is it not? And I really think that goes back to Grand Duke Sergei, because Dmitri explicitly notes in one of his 1906 diary entries when he was 14 that he feels a great sense of relief to be away from the constant shame that he experienced when Sergei was still alive. So that's, something to keep an eye on going forward, the way he uses that word and the way it seems to shape his viewpoint, whether he's talking about himself or, in this case, Russia. You could say that this is very callous of him, this sarcasm about heroes, saying our miracle would take people taking comfort in the thought that our miracle-working heroes will wake up to the patriotic impulse to lay down their lives for their perishing motherland is pretty naive. Well, at first reading, you can look at that and think, well, what about you? You're criticizing the soldiers, our miracle-working heroes. And you're not anywhere close to laying down your life for the perishing motherland. But on the other hand, and that's true, but on the other hand, he's responding specifically to what people are saying, to people that do have this kind of more utopian view of things and who are saying that, our soldiers are miracle workers and they're going to wake up and they're going to intervene at the last minute and prevent this German takeover of Petrograd from happening. So he then refers to the speeches published in the newspapers by Alexander Verkhovsky and Dmitri Verkhovsky, who were at that time the ministers of war and the Navy, very briefly. So what do they have to say? Well, Alexander Verkhovsky, first of all, was a socialist revolutionary, but he was also a career officer. He was anti-Bolshevik because the socialist revolutionaries were intrinsically anti-Bolshevik. And he was a career officer. He was a serious military man. Dmitri Verkhovsky was an admiral. These weren't, people who were made ministers of war in the Navy without having the credentials to do that as far as experience. But anyway, here's what here's a quote that I found from Verkhovsky. One of the quotes from Denikin, actually, who would be a leader of the Tsarist or the White Russians in the Civil War. And he wrote, Verkhovsky preached that discipline must be voluntary. We must come to terms with the mass and on the basis of a common love of country to encourage it voluntarily to assume all burdens of military discipline. It is essential that the discipline is no longer wearing a disagreeable nature of coercion. So this is for Denikin quoting Verkhovsky, and I suppose Dmitri would have seen this quote and others in the newspaper, and obviously it's utopian. There's no military in the world, even in democratic countries, that operates on a democratic basis. Soldiers don't vote for who their commanding officers are going to be, and they don't voluntarily discipline themselves. And Dmitri quite rightly points out that that's absolutely absurd. But this is what the ministers of war and navy are betting on, that everything will be all right because the soldiers and sailors are simply going to rise to the occasion now that they're not under any kind of disagreeable coercive discipline. Well, good luck with that. The Red Army certainly wasn't going to organize itself on the basis of no discipline. So all of that is very interesting. It'd be fascinating to do a whole video on that topic, irrespective of Dmitri, of what was going on in Russia at that time. But what I want to conclude with is this, what is to me just fascinating turnaround at the end. So we see the real Dmitri in this sort of depressed and cynical and pragmatic, actually more pragmatic than cynical, because it's realistic, and cynicism isn't always realistic, but this very pragmatic presentation of what's going on in Russia and how it's likely to turn out. And then, after mocking those who are looking toward miracle-working soldiers, he himself uses the word miracle. There will undoubtedly be a miracle, and the more I think about it, the stronger my belief in it becomes. Well, why on earth would he suddenly say that? I can tell you exactly why. Because these self-help books he's been reading, including The Road to Success and In Tune with the Infinite, are telling him that if you think negative thoughts, then negative things are going to happen. If you think positive thoughts, then good things are going to happen. And so he's catching himself at the end there. He doesn't dare think negative thoughts. And that's why we have this turnaround. Oh no, universe, if you're listening, I'm not having negative thoughts. I know everything's going to work out just fine. Okay. Kind of funny, but, I'm not laughing at him over that. He needed something to bolster his morale. And it's also interesting, given his embrace of new thought and esoteric religion, that he is then saying that the reason that Russia can't perish is because it's a bastion of the Orthodox faith, and the Lord God is not going to allow an Orthodox country with Orthodox people to perish. So that's interesting. All of us are full of contradictions. Dmitri no less than the rest of us no less than him. So on the one hand, yes, you have the esoteric religion and philosophy, but there's this deep-seated loyalty to orthodoxy. Okay, fascinating. What do we have next time? Well, he's going to finish up this long diary entry by talking about his own psychological state, something that he has to be very careful about, as he knows from past experience. And then we'll be going into the day-by-day, weekly count and finding out more about the what happened with the gambling. All right, I hope to see you for all of those. Bye.